Okay, this is episode 8.
No, 9.
No, it's 9.
Is it 9? I don't know.
I think
It might be 10.
No, it's definitely 9. I
think it's 9.5.
Yeah, if anything, it's 9.5. Okay, this is episode 9. How do we do this every time?
I don't know.
We should really do research before we start.
Yeah.
2 Timothy 4, 2-5 says, "Preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long-suffering and doctrine. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and they shall be turned into fables. But watch thou in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, make full proof of thy ministry." So obviously in the beginning of this verse, it talks about being instant in season, out of season. And I feel like my whole life, I've heard like, you need to be instant in season, out of season. Like talking about, if I told you to preach right now, would you be ready? And I'm like,
Yeah.
bruh, I hope you don't do that. That's so like nerve wracking because like I heard on one of the tours, one of the years, wasn't it like Hobby's tour or something? They were like,
It might have been mine because I was with Hobby.
It was your tour.
Yeah.
And they were like, you're going to preach.
Yes,
Oh, dang.
maybe.
Garrett, tell that story, please.
What?
The one where you got to the church and he literally at the service or whatever told you to
Asked me?
Yes.
Yeah, so whenever we got there, I think another individual in my tour was supposed to speak, and he came up to me and he said, "Hey, how do you feel about preaching?" I said, "Well, I don't really know. I'll do it if you need to."
And you had nothing prepared?
Well, I didn't really in the moment, but I didn't know.
This was at the service.
Yeah, it was during the service, like praise and worship was going on.
I would have got up there and said,
and
worship right now.
Yeah, but he said, "Okay, we'll let you know," and it was kind of just the flow of the service, which I get it. It's being spirit led, and you got to be spirit led. I've even had some occasions, and I'm sure this happened to you both as well, if it's the case. But I've been asked to preach, and I had nothing. And then by the time I was supposed to go up there, I remember they introduced me, and I had nothing. I was just sitting on the front row. I was like, "Okay, God." And this was really the biggest time of testing for me. This was the biggest time of growing me and teaching me. It was a time. It was my first tour, and I didn't know what was going to happen on that tour. I just know what I told God and my expectations, and one of those was to flow in the Holy Ghost and flow in the Spirit. And so I remember they called me up, and I said, "Okay, God." And as I go up there, I remember I just began to just start speaking, and I kind of began to realize that my words began to be directed, and that I realized at that point that it was God. And once I got up there, I began to speak, and it was over something that I had previously looked at, but it came forward when I went up there. So I said that an example in relation to my friend, just kind of in the moment, just them saying, "Can you go ahead and speak?"
Was this that service that you went up there and apparently you gave such a direct word to the church? They were like, how did you know that? Was that service?
That was a different service.
Okay, that's the one I was talking about.
That was a different service. That was in, that was a separate service. So I was scheduled to preach that service.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was. If I'm thinking of the same thing that you are. But I mean, I've gone up at times when they've asked me to exhort or do like a 5-minute or like a 10-minute. They said, "Hey, go ahead and go up there." And in those moments, I just, went up there and just said what I felt, said what I felt like the Lord was leading me to say. So, but yes, to answer your question and kind of use those examples, that did happen to me one time, to where kind of like, "Hey, can you preach?" And I've been asked like the day of, it was like a Sunday morning, "Hey, can you preach tonight?" Sure.
No, I remember one time I had I was home for like the summer, or like I was home for like a week or two, and it was a Sunday morning, and this guy from our pastoral staff comes over to me and is like, "Hey, do you want to open up for prayer tonight at before the service for the Sunday night service?" And I was like, we were at altar call, and I was just sitting there. He was literally an inch away from my face, and I just told him, I was like, "I'm not hearing you."
Yeah.
And then he again was like, "Do you want to open up for prayer tonight for service?" And I was just like, "Huh?" I ignored him again. He's like, I'm going to reword it again.
Yeah.
Do you want to get up on the platform with a mic in your hand and say a prayer over the church before service starts?
Yeah.
And I was just like,
You got specific.
I know. I was
Yeah.
like, sure. Yeah, I guess. Like, I literally told him, I was like, my flesh doesn't want to, but sure, my spirit knows I need to.
Yeah.
So I got there that night, and literally like the whole day, like I was a nervous wreck, and I was praying before the service and everything. And after the service was about to start and I had to get up there, I was like, here we go again, stepping out of this boat for the 800th time.
Just like your podcast.
Yeah, for real. I get up there and I just grabbed the mic, and
Yeah.
I literally I remember when I was praying for the church and everything, like I started crying for a second.
Yeah.
And I was
Wow.
just like, where's this emotion coming from? I was like, this is kind of cool. But that was, I guess, a test of being instant in season, out of season.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Oh, something I just began to realize is we only think about instant in season and out of season as being when it happens in season. Most people believe that being instant in season only entails in season, right? And it does, like the act of being instant in season. But being instant in season doesn't just happen in that moment. It happens because of your life previously and before.
Yeah.
That's how you become instant in season. That's how you become instant in season and out of season, is what's before your relationship with God. Because what's the whole purpose of being instant in season, out of season? Your walk with God. Because being instant in season and out of season can entail you walking in the Spirit, and you flowing in the Spirit, and you moving in the Spirit. How does that come? That comes by you walking with God. So if we're not walking with God, and if we're not in step and in perfect sync, I had someone tell me this. As a matter of fact, before I came here, because I was really nervous about coming out here, to be honest, and they came up to me, they prayed over me, they told me, they said, Garrett, you cannot be ahead of God, because if you get ahead of God, you're paving your own way, and you cannot fall behind God, because you won't be on track with him. He told me, he said, you must be in perfect sync with God. And that requires a daily lifestyle, a daily time in his word and in prayer, and daily sacrificing. And so that's what I believe. That's how I believe instant in season and out of season works. It's like when a coach calls up a player who hasn't played in a little while, right? Let's say this player has just been riding the bench this whole time, okay? He doesn't take his position seriously, so he doesn't show up to practice. He doesn't participate, and if he is in practice, he doesn't give his all to practice. But the coach is paying attention to him. The coach sees him. But yet then you have another individual who he's been benched the whole year. He's been benched for 11 games, and there's 12 games. But yet that individual has given his all in practice. He's done what the coach has told him to. He's ran the plays. He studied the plays. And he's done everything right. And in that 12th game, that last game, that coach remembered, okay, I remember this player has not played yet. This player has been on the bench. But he's been faithful in practice. He's been faithful in studying the plays. He's been faithful in listening to me and what I tell him to do. But now I need him. I need him right now in a critical time to win the game. And so he calls up this player, and that, you see, you can't have that instant moment. I believe God can use anybody, period. I believe that. I do. But I believe God looks to those in whom is like the player, that in practice, they give it their all. It's not the real game yet, but they give it their all. They study the playbook. They study the opponent. They listen to what the coach says. They do the things that the other players don't want to do. They pick up. They set up for practice, and they're anticipating of it, a possibility to play, but yet they take practice seriously. That's how we must be in our walk with God. We must take every day seriously. We must take every single day because we don't know when he's going to call us up. We don't know when that change of season is going to happen. We don't know when that transition is going to occur. And so what I tell God a lot is I say, God, I want you to be able to trust me. I want you to be able to trust me whenever you make a decision. I want you to be able to trust me with your own will. I want you to be able to trust me when you transition me, that whenever you call me, that he knows, okay, Garrett's going to do this. I know Garrett will do this, or I know Chris will do this, or I know Jonathan will do this because they've been faithful. So there's a pre-preparation up until the moment of the instant in season and out of season. That's good. That's why it says out of season too, because out of season, in your time of secret, it's like when Jesus, begins to teach. He begins to teach these valuable principles, of praying in secret, praying in those times of where it's just you and God. And he made the example, of course, he always made an example of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He wasn't too fond of them. And so he said they like to pray outside. They like to pray with, showing themselves, and they like to show their praying garments or whatever in that time would show that you're praying. But when you pray, that's what I love is, but ye, or but you. So Jesus singled them out and said, but you're different. When you pray in secret. You pray in your closet. You pray when it's just you and God. And when you pray with just you and God, he will reward you openly. And he will present that. He will present that openly. And that's not even just necessarily so everybody can see you, but that's for in the moment of whenever God does something publicly with you. Does that make sense? Because, it's like it says in his word, it says, when you do the works of God, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which art in heaven. So, and tying this in and making sense of this is it matters what we do before when God calls us to the end season. It matters the out of season leading up to the end season, right? So that's kind of my take on that. Whenever you were reading, that kind of stuck out to me, that you gotta prepare. God will enable, God will help, God will provide that opportunity. But there's a mandate in our life to where we have to walk with him and to where we have to be in perfect sync with him every single day. So whenever he calls us up and whenever he desires us to do whatever we're supposed to do, not even just preach, but in any aspect of ministry, we will be ready.
I'm actually glad you brought up the Pharisees. These were people who, they prayed, they fasted, they dressed modestly, they studied the word, but their heart wasn't in line with God, and God wasn't pleased with that. You see, and I'm trying to say this carefully. We're supposed to dress modestly, we're supposed to pray, we're supposed to fast, but to God, that didn't really matter. He cared about the heart. So he's more pleased with the backslider who comes inside, maybe not the most modest clothing, but their heart is sold out to God and they want the things of God. And he's not pleased with that saint who's been there for 20 years, who dresses modestly, they pray out loud, they worship, they dance, but they show partiality, Their heart isn't in line with God's will and they want to do their own things out of God's thing. Yeah.
I mean, it's just like you see in his word, it's plain and simple. It's just like what you're saying. God would rather us be hot or cold, because if we're lukewarm, he'll spew us out.
Yeah.
And then you can even see it in his word also, where it says a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways.
That's right.
A man that has two ways of thinking, two lifestyles, he won't, it's like also the example of the foolish man that built his house on the sand. Whenever the waves came in, it knocked the house over, but the other man built his house upon the rock. So in agreement to what Jonathan was saying, I think that's very true. That's very applicable, because those Pharisees, they were legalistic. They like to do everything just in a way that they thought that they were doing it right. But Jesus did point out the heart. It's like in Matthew 7, I believe, lay not up treasures upon this earth where moth and dust doth corrupt, but lay your treasures up in heaven, where neither moth nor dust doth corrupt. And it talks about the heart, and then it says that common popular phrase in scripture where it says, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also, or out of the abundance of your heart, So absolutely Jesus identified the heart. So I believe that's vital in being instant in season whenever God appoints, because if your heart's not right, God can't work with a heart that's not given and devoted unto him. You know, I'll say this. This just came to my mind. This really struck me one time. If I've ever felt something, God speaks something to me, it was this. I remember I was thinking about people and just this life. And I remember reading that everybody's made in his image. You know, we're all made in his image. And I remember one time God got a hold of me, and I was just praying. I didn't even ask him about this, but he just kind of prompted me over this. And he helped me understand the difference between us and somebody else that is not living for him. And we're both made in his image, is that we are living for him, right? We've made our decision to walk with him. But those that are made in his image that do not follow him and that do not accept him, God will not intrude on people's self-will. He will not do that. He's a gentleman, as everybody says, and as is what's commonly said. But we give our will to him for those that are made in his image, and we decide to follow him. We decide to walk with him. That's our decision. But I remember he told me so specifically, and I really felt impressed in this. As tragic as it is, those people that are made in his image that do not follow him, that do not walk with him, the only decision that God will be able to make for them is when they die. It's the only decision God will be able to make for them. We're all made in his image. But the difference is that us, ones that walk with God, ones that have decided to walk with him, and we try and submit our will to him, and we make that decision. That's our decision. Everybody's going to have a decision. But the fact of the matter is although God will not intrude his will on somebody else's, there will come a day where God will make a decision for everybody. Either you make the decision now, or one day God will make the decision for you. And the only decision he will be able to make, and the only thing he will be able to do, is whenever it's time for their eternity. That's the only thing he'll be able to do in all their life. And so I said that to say that the heart's a big deal. The heart's a big deal in being instant in season and out of season, because that's what God works with. God works with the heart. It says in God's word that man looks on the outside, but God looks at the heart. And it's cool because you can see this in an example of Saul and David, right? When Saul just continuously disobeyed, was continuously rebellious, you see this, that he got Samuel to finally tell Saul, your time's done, no more. And what he said is he told him, he said, God's looking for a new king now, but not just any king. God's looking for a king and a man after his own heart to do his will. That's what it says in Acts 17 or Acts 19. A man, that's why he loved David, because he was a man after his own heart and one that did his will. And so a heart after God is vitally important just for walking with God. And walking with God prepares you to be instant in season and out of season. Because think of those people. You go back to your passage. Just as Jonathan said, these people endured trials, tribulations, legit persecutions, but what do they have? They had a heart after God, and they walked with God, and they knew God. They had a relationship with God, and that's why those are there. That's why those epistles are there. That's why those letters are there, because they were letters of encouragement. Be strong, be of good courage, uplifting. So I just wanted to kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. And on the second half of the verse where it's talking about that people just want to have their, it calls it itching ears, like pleased. It makes me think of a lot of the churches today where people just want to go to the big churches where it's just like kind of fun, and just like Sunday's something fun where they hear something that's pleasing to their ears.
Yeah.
Or they just get a message that they want to hear that fits their desires.
Yeah.
And they don't want to hear the conviction. They don't want to, leave uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. There's been some times where I was at church and
Sure.
there's a certain preacher. I don't know if anybody knows him, but his name is Josh Herring. And literally, he has come into service. And literally, when I knew he was preaching, I was like, all right, I'm going to go sit in the back row because I don't want to be convicted.
He's going to read your mail.
No, for real. I literally was like, he's going to read my mail. I am out of here.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
a lot of people in this day and age are comfortable and, in a sense, complacent with going to those big churches that just only preach blessings. And they're like okay with that. And it's scary to think how many people are in that.
Yeah.
Well, we've become a performance-based generation. We want to be entertained. I remember on tour, I went to a church, a well-known church. I'm not going to say, but you would know if I said it. But for the youth activities and like the youth service, they had a fog machine. The lights were dim low. They had lights. They had these big balloons, and that was their version to get the kids' attention. Well, there's nothing really wrong with that, but to me, what they're actually doing to these kids is they're trying to make them be emotion-based. If they're not really feeling the hype, if they're not feeling all that emotion, then they can't get into the presence of God. So when I walked in there and saw all that, I was kind of like displeased in my spirit. I'm like, they're really training these kids the opposite of what God wanted them to be, and that's spirit-led.
Yeah. And to piggyback kind of off of that, I remember for people like using things to like kind of get you into the spirit, or be like, the bottom line is like you don't need anything to get in the presence of God. And I remember for the longest time I would listen to music all the time, like put on some Christian worship or something like that. I was like, Jesus. And I remember when before I came here, they had the prayer nights, the Thursday night prayer, and it went on for like 3-4 hours. I'm like, I got this. Yeah. And then I walk in there and like they're praying for like 3 or 4 hours and not a piano key, and nothing, no music, no nothing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is easy. But I never realized the correlation with the music. And since I didn't have like my headphones or anything, I was praying, and like literally like 3 minutes in, I was like, oh my gosh, like what are they praying for? Like, and I remember somebody telling me like the music will like carry your emotions.
Yeah.
And so I realized, I was like, wow, this is kind of scary. I can't pray without music.
Yeah.
And so now, obviously, I've worked on that, and I've like kind of tried to train myself. Like I don't need anything but just me and God to get into His presence. And so I think that was funny that you mentioned that, because a lot of people will use certain things to get them hype. It's like you don't need anything to hype up the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
It's like going on a date. The first date, you're going to have all these goosebumps. You're going to be so excited. Well, 10 dates down the road, you're not going to have those same goosebumps. It's the same thing with God, where not every service you're going to have goosebumps. Not every service you're going to feel to run the aisles or run over everybody, jump the pew. But true relationship is not being emotion-based, but just worshiping Him because you love Him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's good. Right?
You want? We can probably end it there if you want.
Yeah. I'm all right with it.
All right.
I'm hungry.
I think that has been episode 9.
9.
Pretty sure. I think it's 9.
Yeah, pretty sure it's 9.
Yeah, and that was been Out of the Boat with Garrett and Jonathan.
Yes. Awesome.